Airport employees of Reddit, what is the strangest, funniest, scariest thing that happened at your airport? A little different. But I work avionics on F-22s in the Air Force. Most of the work is done outside. One day on mid-shift we get told to go inside, turn off the lights, and not look outside. Not knowing what the hell was going on, we obviously complied. Once everyone was inside, the big stadium lights that covered the entire airfield were turned off and all the entire airfield was dark. We heard low rumbling in the distance that was getting closer and rumors started flying. We were under attack. Aliens. You name it. Eventually we could hear 3 large planes fly very low overhead and be gone. After 15 more minutes we were given the go ahead to go back outside and back to work. To this day I still don't know what the hell happened. I would assume that it was a classified prototype they didn't want seen. Not an employee but a passenger. I got flagged for a random tsar pat down and the agent asked me if I had any metal in my body. To which I said, I have an IUD. The agent freaks out and starts flagging other agents over. She musters all her calm and says please repeat that you have an IUD on you, to which I had to say no. IUD. A copper intrauterine device. For birth control. She didn't know what an IUD was. I bet you'll remember now. Not nearly as funny but similar misunderstanding of IUD. Grandmother. You better start taking birth control if you don't want to get pregnant. Me. Well. I probably shouldn't tell you this. But. I got an IUD. Grandmother. Shakes head unbelievable. Drinking and driving. I work at my local airport. I live on a tiny island and this airport is smaller than our library. And just last summer we had a hurricane looming down on us. Everyone is getting packed up to evacuate. We're renting cars like crazy to people fleeing and we're trying to get them out of the storm area. I was out checking on the cars we had and when I walked back up there was a man sitting on a bench out front. With an apocalyptic looking storm bearing down on us. Wind whipping everywhere. Just soulfully playing the trombone. No idea where he came from or what he was doing but it was surreal. Like something out of a David Lynch film. Edit. To clarify. This island is tiny. But it is also very close off the coast and has a bridge to the mainland. Worked at Perth Airport until recently. Most flights in Perth go to Bali and you see some right characters. Read. Bali Bogans. A Jetstar flight was delayed by 7 hours and a woman and her husband used the time to get absolutely shit-faced. The woman fancied a cigarette and rather than go outside and go through security again, lit up in the middle of the duty free. My colleagues quickly tried to stop her. But she told them to FCK off. Q airport police. $10. 000 fine and no flight to Bali. Should have listened to the staff. Worked for a summer as a skycap at an airport in Maine. A couple of the 9/11 hijackers came through that airport. And then to Logan, in Boston, which is where the hijacking took place. They chose this airport in Portland precisely because it was kinda podunk and no one would pay attention as much. A guy I worked with actually showed them to where the rental car place was because the way the airport was set up back then it was in this weird corner and people would ask for our help to find it constantly. Poor guy felt like he was in some way responsible. I used to do cargo for Delta and British Airways. We ship a lot of dead people. A lot of animals. Too. They actually sent me to LA to go to a class entirely on animal handling. Here's regulations and procedures for everything all the way up to elephants and whales and shit. Weirdest thing we ever got to actually ship was an alligator of some sort. Pittsburgh International. 3 AM or so several years ago. Watched an older woman tumble down the up escalator. Every time she flipped over she yelled I'm okay like Philbert from Rocco's Modern Life. Flop I'm okay, flop I'm okay, flop I'm okay. Rolled in place for maybe a minute before someone shut the thing off. I worked at a corporate aircraft maintenance place. And we had a situation where this crazy woman somehow got out on the secured ramp area. By the time one of our line service guys saw her, she had the main entry door open up on a Global XRS aircraft. When he pulled up, she looked at him and asked if he could help her get her bags on board. When he told her he couldn't, she told him she was going to fly the plane to China and didn't want to be late. After that occurrence, the security at our airport became insane. Not me, but my father was regional manager of one of the rental car companies at the airport, and on 9/11 when all flights were grounded, everyone needed rental cars and it was havoc. My father said the phone rang and he almost didn't answer because he was so busy. Turns out it was the company CEO and ordered him to hand out keys free. No cost. No documentation, as the situation was severe and all other major rental companies followed suit. Not necessarily strange, funny or scary, but it is one of the few stories he told me about the job as a kid that I always remember. A school friend's father worked on passport control at Gatwick in the mid-80s. In those days, passports were often handwritten and had spaces for things like distinguishing features. One day a young woman presented her passport to him, and he opened it and compared the photo, and then paused before saying, "This is a bit unusual." He showed her the open passport, which read in part, "Distinguishing features. Big tits." She exclaimed, "Simmy bloody brother. I'll kill him." Not an employee. Dad ran a business in Missouri and hired a mechanic who ended up being horrible. Left his tools everywhere. Trucks he worked on would break down. Everything was covered in oily fingerprints, etc. Employee was fired and forgotten. Fast forward a few years. My parents are on their honeymoon in Cancun, getting on the plane to come back home, when the pilot announces over the PA system that the plane can't take off for a while because of maintenance. My dad looks out the window at the wing and sees oily fingerprints and tools all over the wing and the ground. His old mechanic walks out from under the wing and begins working under a panel on the wing. Dad gets super worried and wants off the plane immediately. Edit for all the questions. No, he didn't get off, since they'd paid for the flight. I don't think mom was going to let them leave in a million years. They made it safely home, or I wouldn't be here to tell you all the story. Not me, but a friend. He used to work refueling planes. Most days during lunch he would sit in the airport and do some people watching. Anyway, a cart with a bunch of baggage rolls by and the bag on the end falls off without anyone noticing but him. After some time, security is notified of the unknown bag. Taking all precautions, security bring in the bomb sniffing dog to check it out. The dog sniffs it for a second and then all of a sudden begins to hump the bag. Worked at a tiny little airport with puddle hopper planes. Plane landed on a really f-king windy day in the winter, so there was still some ice on the ground. I went out to flag the plane in and watched incredulously as the wind blew the entire plane sideways toward the ditch next to the taxiway. The pilot had to do some serious engine revving to keep the plane from going into the ditch. Kind of funny and a little scary. Luckily no one was passengers were on board. Edit. Because you're an L retentive. Edit 2. Quick clarification that they landed fine because the wind was parallel with the runway. However, the taxiway they were attempting to go down was perpendicular to the wind. 60-70 mph winds plus some residual ice on the taxiway equals no bueno. Tail of the plane was taking the brunt of the wind and trying to drag the rest of the plane in the ditch. Kind of looked like someone had an invisible rope attached to the tail and was trying to drag it into the ditch with a tractor or something. It was crazy. Airport employ falconers. The birds are used to keep other birds away from aircraft, because a bird in an engine can really mess up someone's day. So this falconer had come into the airport with his bird to grab a cup of coffee. He decided to try to impress some ladies by taking the hawk's hood off and doing a little demonstration. What he failed to notice was the starlings resting outside on a steel beam. Hawk flew after starlings, smoked the glass and broke its neck. Thousands of dollars worth of highly trained bird gone. I was a ramp agent for a while. For those unfamiliar with the term, it means I loaded and unloaded bags. Some of the more interesting things I saw were at baggage processing. A list of things I saw in baggage processing. A human head transport. It was a big nitrogen-cooled container. It was declared as a human head tissue. Human eyeballs. Human genitals. Human skin. For skin grafts I suppose. Deceased person. Lab research rats. A big medical college is one town over. Horse semen. Midwestern airport. So I saw it a lot. Bull semen. Human semen. Snakes. Doggers in cages. I always tried to calm them down. Please don't fly with your dogs if you can avoid it. I tend to just transport my semen in its handy carrying pouch. My time to shine. Most of the airport work is mundane, but you will get the odd passenger that leaves an impression on you. There was a group of people coming through for a business trip and their boss had never flown before. One of his employees came in and explained they told him he needed dental records for TSA and wanted us to play along. So the boss comes in and hands me his ID and an x-ray from his dentist to check in for his flight. Trying not to laugh, I show it to my co-worker who points at it and says, "Well, TSA might have an issue with that." Dude's face went white as a sheet until his employees busted up laughing. He got super red in the face and eventually started laughing at himself. Never let it be said that airports are humorless places. A 767 from our neighbors here on the ramp took a turn too sharp on the taxiway in winter and got stuck in the snow mud. It was stuck there for 36 hours while they brought in their ACMS guys from their main hub to try and get it out. Meanwhile, 80,000 plus lbs of Amazon orders and other stuff important enough to burn jet fuel to move just had to sit. I can't imagine what it cost them to recover it all on the plane. My father was in the US Air Force. They had a tech that worked on ejection seats. Decided to end his life. Left a suicide note in the plane. He activated the ejection seat inside the hangar. My dad was a facilities engineer and had to repair the various things his body cut through. Not me, but a guy I once met. He works at the counter for a big local airline. There was a lady about mid to late 50s about to board with 4 big suitcases. This was a time when you normally could bring up to 2 suitcases or 23 kilograms. He notices this and tells the lady she would have to pay for the extra 2 suitcases. The lady nonchalantly says, "Oh, my husband is carrying those." He asks about her husband and again, completely relaxed and in a natural voice, she points at the plane and answers that's him in the coffin. After that he apologizes and let the lady board. Edit. A little bit of clarification. Edit 2. 7k upvotes. My parents worked in airports and told me this story that happened sometime in the late 70s. They notice a patch of purple on the marble floor near the check-in queue. Thinking someone has spilt their red wine on the floor, a cleaner comes over and clears it up. About half an hour later, there's another pool of purple. A different cleaner comes along, clears it up. Eventually the original cleaner comes back, notices the same pool he cleared up already is back. He doesn't know what's going on. He looks up. There's an air vent, dripping something. Maybe it's air conditioning coolant or something. He reports it to his supervisor. Nothing happens for a day or two. They just keep mopping up this coolant. Eventually they send an air con tech into the roof. He comes back down the ladder, white as a sheet. It's a body. Turns out someone had tried to break past security by climbing through the air ducts. This is pre-Die Hard. Remember? So quite clever. Wasn't so clever was taking a wrong turn in the dark and falling 30 feet into a fan mechanism drop. Smoosh. My mother was on her way to work at YHZ in pre-board security. She called me to say she just saw a massive explosion. As I made my way to the fire depot, my pager went off, alerting us to a 747 cargo plane crashing just past the runway. It was easily in my top 3 craziest scenes to be on. My grandmother was a stewardess for Delta for decades. She was serving on a commercial flight to Moscow, Russia during the 80s when Russia-US relations weren't so groovy. During the flight, 2 Russian MiG fighter jets came up alongside the plane. Scared the hell out of everybody, including the crew. They thought that they were going to be shot down. After some confusion, it was announced that the MiGs were escorting the Delta flight as a sort of farewell salute to the Delta captain who was piloting his last flight. Wasn't funny in any way. But this guy had to bring the ugliest dog I have ever seen to the airport and send it to his ex-wife so that she could put it down. She hated him and the dog, but she had a better lawyer. Guy was a big burly dude fighting back tears the whole time and asked if he could take him out to play with him in the grass one more time. On the way back through Tsar from a class trip to Germany, one of my classmates got pulled aside from the group because he bought gummy bears in bulk from a Haribo store and they thought he was smuggling something in them. Dude just really liked gummies. Worked at an airline over the summer as an intern. I was assisting in the check-in area and helping passengers who use the kiosks to check in. Now this was the time many airlines introduced basic economy and many people didn't know about the new baggage rules which won't let you bring on a carry-on bag. Just one personal item. This family of 5 comes along returning home and they seem to know about the rule. Maybe they encountered it on the way here, but they all had a backpacks, a couple of them more than one actually. So I go and kindly remind them about the basic economy baggage rules and they snapped back at me and said they knew. So they had about 9 bags, all relatively small bags. So in order to save money on their checked bags, the father takes out a big roll of tape and just sits down in the check-in area taping their bags together so it'll only be one. Everyone looked at them. But it worked. I work the cargo ramp. We're at the very edge of the main runway. And there's a marshy area about 200 feet from the end of the runway. One day we saw a pickup roll out on the service road near the marsh. And hear several shotgun blasts. A couple minutes later, the airport guys in the truck roll up and ask if anyone wants some free geese. One of our crew took 2 dead geese home and smoked them for us. Delicious. Apparently, the geese were just coming right back to that spot if they were forcibly relocated. So they had to be permanently removed. One time a couple of us were wing walking a 757 back from the gate while our ACMS guy drove the pushback. After the jet is backed up, we're supposed to detach the pushback vehicle from the tow bar. Then detach the tow bar from the plane's landing gear. And reattach the tow bar to the pushback vehicle. That day, the 757's parking brake failed. And as we detached from the pushback, the plane started rolling toward us with the engines running. Looking up at a 100,000 pounds vehicle that's already basically on top of me while the engines came toward me was quite the experience. The captain had to stand on his pedal brake to stop the plane rolling so we could finish and get clear. Both the other people with me immediately went out for a smoke. Worked at the airport in Melbourne, Florida. A family arrived from Spain for vacation. Apparently their travel agent screwed up the flight reservations. They were supposed to go to Melbourne, Australia. I later heard they made the most of it and ended up going to Disney, I think. Not an airport employee but my daddy's. I'm sure he's got many stories but my favorite is one I also experienced. We're in the Tsar line as a family. On our way to visit family across the country. The line is its regular slow self. But we're nearing the point where we have to take off our shoes and belts and whatnot. Suddenly, there's a commotion in front of us. Where people pick us their bags after scanning. A woman has packed the following things into her carry-on and is refusing to hit R when they tell her she can't take them on. A full-size Costco double pack of peanut butter, a toaster, the kind that flings your toast in the air, a blender with blade. I'm sure there were other things too. But I have never forgotten those 3 things being slowly pulled out of her bag. Now I'm imagining a woman trying to hijack a plane using a plugged-in blender. Like, slowly advancing on the cockpit. Pausing intermittently to plug it into the next outlet. And one more. The pilot for one of our smaller planes requested de-ice. He's a very picky guy when it comes to spraying his plane. So he got out to inspect when he thought the crew was done. The de-ice truck was on the other side of the plane. and the crew didn't see him get out. They weren't done. He got soaked by hot orange glycol. Fortunately, it was indirect spray coming off the plane instead of directly from the nozzle at high pressure. The flight was delayed while he ran inside to change, swearing the whole way. My mom worked as a TSA agent for years. Most days were pretty calm and people are usually polite and understanding. The worst treatment she gets on a day-to-day occurrence are the occasional scoff and snobby attitude. One day though, people were in a really bad mood and she couldn't figure out why until this old lady came through. "Excuse me ma'am, but I think someone's dog might have relieved itself nearby." My mom said it would be taken care of soon enough and checked the lady's bag. Service animals are everywhere and some of the emotional support ones can be less trained than their handicap counterparts. It isn't till like a few minutes later that the smell finally hits her. It wasn't dog poop. Apparently this happens every so often. Someone waiting in line just can't hold it but doesn't want to lose their spot, so they drop trousers and go. This person somehow managed to get away with it without anybody seeing.